You think the golden age of cinema was all about glamour and style? Think again. The 1952 film Fanfan La Tulipe, beloved around the world for its high-energy sword fights, playful romance, and the undeniable charm of its leads, hides a backstory so fiery you'd think the real action was off-screen. Forget the polished smiles and practiced grace. Behind closed doors, chaos reigned at every stage. Jealousies got out of hand, egos exploded, and on more than one occasion, blood actually spilled on set. If you think legends like Gerard Philippe and Gina Lollobrigida could get through a shoot like this without a meltdown, you're in for a shock. The director Kay, well, he didn't just want to make a movie, he wanted control. All of it. Every camera angle, every whisper on set, even the smallest detail. The producers? They had their own ideas and their own money on the line. You'd expect tension, maybe a few arguments, but what went down on this film almost pushed everyone to their breaking point. If you want to know how a movie could nearly fall apart because of clashing personalities and backroom deals, you're in the right place. Stay with us to the end, and don't forget to subscribe, because you won't believe what happened when the cameras weren't rolling. The trouble started almost as soon as the contracts were signed. Kay, the director, was known for his artistic vision, but he was even more famous for his iron grip. He treated the set like his personal fiefdom, barking out orders and making it clear he wasn't interested in anyone else's opinion, least of all the producers, Guy Lafranc and Henri Diamant-Berger. These men had been through tough shoots before, but nothing prepared them for the battle of wills that was about to erupt. It wasn't just about art. It was about control, pride, and money. Every day brought a new confrontation. Should the sword fight be longer, the kiss shorter, the costumes more daring? Kay wanted his way, always. One morning at the studios de Boulogne, the tension finally burst. The head of cinematography tried to alter a shot to please the studio backers. Kay found out, stormed into the editing room, and in front of everyone, including Gina Lollobrigida, accused his colleague of betrayal. The argument didn't stop until lights were practically shaking on their stands, and the whole crew was too spooked to look up from their coffees. Gina, who had never seen such a spectacle on any set, tried to calm things down, but Kay was relentless. For him, only his vision mattered, even if it meant stepping on every single toe within 50 meters of his director's chair. But that was just the first round. The producers, fuming at being sidelined, secretly began recruiting script doctors to rework the dialogue and spice up the romance. They never told Kay, slipping pages to actors during private lunches or late-night phone calls. Gerard Philippe started showing up with new lines, tripping over words he'd never rehearsed, and Kay noticed. The air thickened. Each person eyed the others, wondering who would snap first. It wasn't filmmaking, it was a chess match played with loaded pistols under the table. By the second week, nobody was sleeping well. The cast tiptoed around Kay, who yelled at the lighting crew for a misplaced shadow and flung a script across the room when he thought a scene was butchered by meddling hands. Gina Lollobrigida, always sharp and beautiful, rolled her eyes in private, but understood the stakes. If this film flopped, her French career could be over before it began. And then, in a move that would haunt the production, the producers began threatening to shut down funding until their demands were met. They pulled Kay into a tiny office lined with production stills, voices low and sharp. "Either you listen, or we're done here," Guy Lafranc snapped, hands flat on the desk. Kay didn't flinch. He threatened back, vowing the film would never make it out the door if he wasn't allowed to see it through his way. The stalemate turned days into nightmares. Crew whispered about what would be left standing by the time anyone called wrap. All the while, tickets for the film were already being pre-sold, and studio heads from Paris to Rome placed bets on whether anything half-coherent would ever make it to the premiere. The pressure was more than just creative. It was about jobs, reputation, and the very future of the studio itself. But just when it seemed the tension would tear the set apart, Gerard Philippe took matters into his own hands. One evening, after wrapping a fight scene that left his white shirt splattered with fake blood, he cornered Kay and the producers. He told them, point blank, that he'd walk if they didn't knock it off. The set, for a fleeting moment, cooled. No one wanted to lose their lead. The director swallowed his pride. The producers retreated, temporarily. But resentment simmered. And as the crew shuffled back to work, everyone wondered how long the uneasy truce would last. If you thought power struggles were wild, no one on the Fanfan La Tulipe set was ready for what happened when the chemistry between Gerard Philippe and Gina Lollobrigida spilled out of the script and into real life. From the moment rehearsals began, rumors started to spread through the corridors at Studios de Boulogne about glances that lingered just a little too long, late arrivals together, and laughter behind closed doors. Gina had just arrived in France, already stirring up excitement in Parisian tabloids with her Italian glamour, while Gerard was the golden boy of French cinema, handsome, poetic, and by all public appearances, already committed in his real life. But the boundaries between performance and reality shattered quickly under the heat of studio lights. From the first sword-fighting lessons, sparks flew. Assistants noticed them holding eye contact, whispering jokes the others couldn't quite catch. Their on-screen romance got intense fast, and the crew had front-row seats, watching Gina touch Gerard's arm off camera while he grinned like he owned the world. The director, always eager for authenticity, encouraged them to develop their connection, not caring what happened after hours. But it didn't take long for jealousy and suspicion to slip in and sour the mood. Gina's personal assistant started fielding angry phone calls from her fiancé back in Rome, desperate for explanations after reading Parisian gossip. Gerard's wife Anne visited the set one afternoon, setting off alarm bells when she spotted her husband and Gina laughing on a secluded bench in the garden. That evening, tension exploded. Gina found roses in her dressing room with no note, while word spread that Gerard had booked them a private table at one of the city's most expensive restaurants after a long night of shooting. The line between performance and reality became almost impossible to spot. But the show must go on, or at least that's how Kay justified ignoring every sign of trouble. The rest of the cast started whispering. Some said Gina was playing with fire just to keep the spotlight, while others blamed Gerard for risking everything. A few crew members noticed the pair would leave wrap parties early and vanish together. Critics in the press began speculating about their off-screen affair, and the production's PR team scrambled to control the narrative, releasing staged photos of the two with the rest of the cast, and inventing stories about professional respect and friendship. Everyone on set could see right through it. Yet there was a break in the storm. After weeks of tension, a crew party turned into a relief valve. Gerard, tipsy but charming, stood up and publicly toasted Gina, thanking her for reminding the cast what passion is supposed to look like. Laughter and applause echoed, and for a weekend, all seemed well. Kay even joked that he should quit directing to start marriage counseling. For a few days, the set had energy again. Actors hit their marks, scenes came together, and Gina even sent a thank you card to the costume department. But the relief didn't last. Paparazzi staked out the studio and snapped photos of Gerard and Gina slipping out a side door late at night. Gossip columns ran wild, headlines screaming about the new "it couple." The producers, worried the scandal would hurt ticket sales, tried to threaten Gina with a contract clause about inappropriate behavior, but she just laughed and told them they were wasting their time. Anne, Gerard's wife, stopped coming to the set. Crew members started taking sides, and even Kay wondered if the film would survive so many distractions. On the first day of the final shoot in Versailles, Gina arrived late, her makeup smudged and her face stiff with nerves. Gerard waited for her, arms crossed. Word had gotten out about a blow-up between them the night before. The director, furious about losing a precious hour of daylight, threatened to fire Gina on the spot. Instead, she burst into tears, refusing to leave her trailer. Gerard stormed in after her, slamming the door. Shouting echoed down the corridor. What really went on in there? Nobody knows. But when they finally emerged, both looked shaken. The rest of the shoot passed in icy silence, every interaction forced for the cameras. Crew tiptoed around, knowing one wrong word could set someone off. And just like that, the fire burned out. Once the film wrapped, the two leads went separate ways. Gina straight to Rome, Gerard back to Paris, leaving only stories smoldering behind them. The love story that set the studio alight had collapsed, but the film captured every spark, making the legend bigger than either of them. Just when it seemed things couldn't get any messier, production faced a whole new set of dangers. This time, not from broken hearts, but from actual physical danger on set. The romance had fizzled, tempers were raw, and nerves were shot. But nobody on Fanfan La Tulipe could afford to relax. The shoot was about to get rougher. From day one, the script demanded wild action. Rooftop duels, chases on horseback, sword fights in crowded country taverns. Director K, always pushing for realism, insisted nearly everything be done live, with real swords and horses, not studio fakes. Safety protocols were murky at best. There were no weeks of rehearsing with padded swords. Instead, the cast was thrown into training sessions run by ex-military fencers and stuntmen from the French cavalry, who believed pain built character. It didn't take long before the accidents started. During an early skirmish, a stand-in took a real slice across the shoulder. Nothing fatal, but enough to send him to the hospital. The insurance agent, a short man with a nervous twitch, threatened to pull coverage unless safety was taken seriously. Kay just shrugged and told everyone, "Wounds look good on film." Gerard Philippe volunteered to do most of his own stunts, desperate to prove he could fight like the swashbucklers he'd admired as a boy. That meant every leap from a balcony, every dash down muddy hills, and every sword clash was the real deal for him. The famous scene on the roof of the inn almost didn't make it into the picture. Gerard lost his footing on damp tiles, slipped, and barely grabbed the edge before tumbling into a gutter 3 stories up. The crew watching from the street below let out a collective gasp. While he limped away from the set, refusing help, the stunt supervisor got into a shouting match with Kay about risking the only bankable star we have. For a day, everybody believed filming would shut down completely due to injury. But Gerard came back the next morning, bruised but grinning. Reporters caught him and asked what happened to his hand, which was now bandaged. He winked and muttered, "Fanfan must bleed." Not to be outdone, Gina Lollobrigida decided to take on a small stunt herself. Her refusal to let a double ride the runaway carriage in the final escape scene thrilled Kay, until the horses bolted for real. Gina bounced around the bench, clinging for dear life while shouting for the driver to stop. The carriage shattered a wheel, sending everyone flying into a muddy ditch. Gina climbed out, mud covering her dress, but laughing and waving at the terrified crew. The costume mistress nearly fainted, convinced Gina's contract was about to be canceled. But Gina just wiped her face and returned to set, a legend in the making. The tension reached its peak when an actual sword blade snapped in the climactic duel sequence. The broken point grazed Gerard's cheek and grazed a background actor's arm. Blood spilled, cameras stopped, and for the first time, even Kay seemed shaken. Paramedics patched everyone up, while the producers finally drew a line. No more real swords, no more reckless tricks, and a professional stunt double was brought in for the last scenes. But the damage, both physical and emotional, had been done. After that, morale shifted. The cast and crew, battered and running on adrenaline, pulled together to finish. There wasn't much laughter left, only grit and a race against time. Stuntmen doubled Gerard for the hardest moments, but he still insisted on taking a few dangerous risks, leaving small scars he carried for life. Gina's nerves were shot, and she kept asking if the next film might be a simple romance, anything without horses or blades. When the last shot was finally called, there was no wild party, just exhausted relief. The stories of near-death escapes and real injuries would follow everyone home. Yet the film itself, when finally pieced together in a smoky editing room, was electric. Every fall, every near miss, every splash of sweat and blood had made it onto the screen. Audiences wouldn't know how much had nearly unraveled. They'd see only adventure, magic, and the legendary chemistry of its battered stars. The painful legacy of those wild, dangerous months lived on in whispered stories for years, a testament to what happens when ambition, ego, and danger collide behind the gleaming surface of a classic film. The turbulence and risk, the shattered trust in the bruised bodies, it all became woven into the legend of Fanfan La Tulipe. In the end, through all the shouted threats, late-night escapes, and ambulance calls, there was only one truth on that set. In order to make a legend, someone always has to bleed. When the chaos finally faded and the lights went down at the last wrap party, those who'd survived Fanfan La Tulipe were left with more than just stories. Some had scars, others had reputations forever changed. The aftermath spread wider than the smoke that hung over those Paris soundstages. Gerard Philippe, now seen by all of France as a dashing hero with real wounds, carried his marks into legend. Gina Lollobrigida, after all those stares, whispers, and impossible escapes, held her head higher than ever, launched into international fame despite the rumors, mud, and broken nerves. Director Christian Jacques, for all his arrogance and obsession with control, walked away with a masterpiece. He channeled every bit of on-set turmoil, the fights, jealousy, exhaustion, and even near tragedies, into a film that ticked like a time bomb, ready to explode on the big screen. When Fanfan La Tulipe premiered, packed theaters across Europe felt the rush that came from real danger stitched into every frame. Critics who'd bet on disaster now raved about the chemistry, the daring stunts, the glimmer in Gerard's wounded eyes, and the sharpened passion burning through each scene. But the price was high. Relationships on set were left scarred and fragile. Some old friendships ended, others never fully recovered from the summer of 1951. Crew who thought they'd seen everything learned new boundaries of chaos. Whispers about Gina and Gerard inspired tabloid headlines for months, but both managed somehow to turn scandal into rocket fuel for their next projects. French cinema, and even Hollywood, took notice. The legend of Fanfan La Tulipe grew every year. Kay's refusal to settle for fake danger, Gerard's daredevil ego, and even Gina's willingness to step into real danger became stories told in every film school and bar where actors nursed bruises and dreams. Studios everywhere wanted the same magic, but few were willing to spill as much sweat, blood, or pride. What had all the pain and chaos meant, really? For Gerard Philippe, it was a chance to become more than a matinee idol, a memory burned into film forever, remembered as the actor who didn't fake a thing. For Gina Lollobrigida, it became her gateway to an unstoppable career. For Christian Jacques and the battered French film industry still recovering from war, it was proof that risk and emotion could reclaim a nation's love of adventure. And for movie history, Fanfan La Tulipe turned its chaos into artistry, its conflict into motion, and its scars into box office gold. It lived on, not just because it was beautiful and clever, but because you could feel the tremors of all those wild moments behind every sword fight, every stolen kiss, every gasp and cry. Some legends build themselves quietly. This one was hammered out in fire, sweat, and scandal. So the next time you see Gerard laughing as Fanfan, or Gina looking up with that fierce sparkle in her eyes, remember, it wasn't just acting. They, the crew, the director, every one of them paid the real price. And every frame carries the truth of what movies cost when no one is willing to play it safe. That's the untold, unpolished, and unforgettable backstage story of Fanfan La Tulipe, the movie that nearly broke everyone, but remade them as legends. If you want more wild, true tales from behind the silver screen, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stories like these never leave their scars behind. By the time the last reels of Fanfan La Tulipe were sealed in their canisters, something had changed for everyone involved. Gerard Philippe left the studio with a new mythology clinging to his name. No longer just a pretty face, but a real swashbuckler. A man who risked it for the role and gave audiences more than make-believe. Gina Lollobrigida, after months of rumor and surviving the chaos side by side with her co-star, stepped onto the world stage, her stardom lit by grit and rumor as much as by glamour. Christian Jacques, whether loved or cursed by his crew, delivered a film that became a benchmark, its energy permanently charged by all the hard-won drama of its creation. As for the film itself, it thundered through cinemas, gathering ovations in Cannes, applause across Europe, and even picking up the Best Director award at the festival. Critics and audience alike watched those duels and chases, never knowing just how real the danger, bruises, and betrayals behind them had been. All the real blood, risky dances on rooftops, and fiery disputes had distilled into pure, on-screen magic. For decades, every screening of Fanfan La Tulipe has carried a ghost of those wild months in Paris. Passion, pride, and all the mess of what it really takes to build a legend. Looking back, the scars left by the film's making became signatures of greatness, not just for the cast and crew, but for European cinema itself. Through the argument, through the risk, through rumors and raw nerve, Fanfan La Tulipe proved that sometimes chaos is the secret ingredient to immortality. That's the story behind the myth, a journey from near disaster to eternal fame. If you've enjoyed this wild ride through the real history hidden behind the romance and adventure, hit that like button, share your thoughts, and be sure to subscribe for more true behind-the-scenes tales. Because every classic has a secret side, and only the brave stick around to hear it all the way to the end.